In Good Morning Uganda, normally here gives you updates on the weather to know what really happens. It's another fresh and good Monday morning. Welcome and thank you for joining us. Now our conversation is just going to delve around coffee, and of course you've had Uganda talk about our coffee and what coffee means to Uganda. Now joining me in studios are two very important visitors for me who know this conversation over coffee. Mr. James Kizito Mayanja, he's the Market Intelligence and Information Manager from Uganda Coffee Development Authority. You're welcome, Mr. Kizito Mayanja.
I'm happy to be on UBC Radio. Good morning.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us and for being with us here. Together with Mr. Kizito Mayanja is Mr. Joseph Nkandu, the Executive Director of the National Union of Coffee, Agribusiness and Farm Enterprises, in brief, called NUCAFE. You're welcome, Mr. ED of NUCAFE, Joseph Nkandu.
Thank you very much for hosting us. Good morning, viewers.
Okay, what do you do as NUCAFE?
NUCAFE, we are an association of coffee farmers in Uganda, and we are involved in the entire coffee value chain. Therefore, we farm coffee, we process coffee, we export coffee, we roast coffee, and we empower our coffee farmers.
How many Ugandans are into coffee farming?
NUCAFE as a membership organization, currently we have 1.5 million smallholder coffee farmers who are organized within NUCAFE, and from around the whole country we have 215 member associations and cooperatives.
215 member associations and cooperatives.
That's right.
Okay, welcome. Mr. Kizito Mayanja.
Yes, sir.
Karibu.
Uganda Coffee Development Authority is a government agency under the Ministry of Agriculture and Industry and Fisheries, which is charged with the development, the regulation and promotion of the coffee industry in Uganda. And as such, we offer services in training of farmers, processors, exporters, as well as regulating them, but on top of that also promotion of coffee as a final product. And on top of that, we also disseminate market information to stakeholders on how the global markets have, I think, fared. And you know that Uganda is a price taker, and so we normally, I think, get our prices from the global markets. The one in Robusta, which is in London, and another one in for Arabica, which is in New York. And so we disseminate the information to all stakeholders on a daily basis. And as we speak now, I think a daily report has already now been disseminated to stakeholders using various means, one of which I think is the SMS facility, which is when you are a Robusta growing in a Robusta growing region, you just tap in Robusta, just type Robusta, send one SMS to 7197. Now you should be able to receive information on the pricing of Chiboko prices, of fair average quality, which is clean coffee, in the various regions in Uganda. And if you're in the Arabica regions, you just type Arabica, send to 7197, and then you'll be receiving information on the prices.
Okay.
And if you really need now to know how the global markets have kind of fared, you just type the word coffee in full, and then send to 7197.
As an SMS?
And you're able, yes, as an SMS. And after about 30 seconds, you'll be able to get the information.
You sent to 7197. You just type coffee and send to 7197.
Yes, okay. And on top of that, we also have a call center. The call center addresses not only pricing, but also other coffee-related issues. Okay. One of which I think is okay. Let me give the number. The number is 0800 353 530.
Okay.
So anyone can
35, 35, 30.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much. Now, it is said that Uganda is the 8th largest world producer, I think, in the world, and of course the 7th largest exporter in the world. Now, these are the statistics that you at UCDA give to us.
Yes.
And you tell us much more of what we gain, what we recoup, and what we possibly get from these. And now, how true is this, first of all, and what does it mean to the coffee growers, the 1.5 million small farmers like he's talking about, and the 215 different, you call them associations?
Associations, yes.
Yes, what do these figures mean? When you tell them, in the world, we are number 8 producer, we are number 7 exporter,
yes.
Largest exporter in the world. What do these figures mean to a Uganda Semakola, somewhere deep in the villages, who is actually a coffee farmer? I'll start with you, Mr. Chizito Mayanja, before I get to Mr.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Jagenda, for that very interesting question. Okay, now like he said 1.5, but nationally we have 1.7 million coffee households. And I think the number could be higher than that, because we are now...
So he has some duty to find the other.
Yes, exactly.
Those who are missing
exactly.
from the 1.5.
Yes, but I think what the farmer really is going to gain is that now, like, you know that coffee is tradable, that it is kind of exported, that most of the coffee which we produce is exported. And as such, now if 1.7 million coffee households possibly are affected either by low coffee prices or higher coffee prices, for me, I would imagine that even the economy would be kind of, would also be affected. But on top of that, I think coffee also, acts as a social balance, but also in macroeconomic management. You always see Bank of Uganda, when coffee prices go up, I think the balance of payment, there is a way balance of payment is also kind of also raised, and so that's why also Bank of Uganda now is very keen on how the coffee coffee subsector kind of performs. If the ups go higher, then the economy, I think is kind of stabilized. Yes.
Okay, Mr. Nkandu, what do these statistics put you as a no coffee, for example?
Very important. When the coffee prices increase, it means more money into the pockets of the farmer.
Yes.
And when prices go low, and that low, like we experienced in 2019, and even way back in 2001, you find that most of the farmers almost went out of coffee production. Therefore, when we talk about coffee prices, it means a lot to the farmer. And what the farmer gets out of the retail value. And let us face it, the farmers get less than 5% of the retail value of coffee. Okay? And therefore, this has been on for quite some time. And it has been, deliberate. And these are some of the issues, I think, later on as we go into details of our discussion that we would like to be addressed. Because these days we talk about sustainability. When you talk about sustainability, you have to talk about it in the context of economic sustainability, social, and environmental. And therefore, you can only sustain coffee production if your incomes are good.
Sure.
And therefore, the higher statistics that we see at a world level, as compared to the farmers, there is that kind of discrepancy, which needs to be, resolved. Ever since, we started coffee production.
Thank you very much. Now, we've got so many radio stations, so many TV stations in the country, and so many media outlets or medium of disseminating information.
Yes.
Now, just recently, there was something that had become a media blaze in this country, and that was Uganda Vivudem. Now, the Uganda Vivudem is because Uganda notified the International Coffee Organization of its intentions that they wouldn't be joining the extension of the IC agreements of 2007, the International Coffee Agreements of 2007, effective, I think, last month. Yes. And just because of that now, many coffee takers or coffee farmers possibly did not even have an idea of what ICO is or what ICA is, and they just hear it now. When you hear the conversation over Uganda, Uganda, then somebody gets to thinking, okay, we grow this coffee, not even for Ugandan market, because we are the same Ugandans who grow coffee and say, you know, when I take coffee, I feel this pulse, gonko bisentu nunsi, and I don't need it. So we know we are doing it for some other market somewhere else. Yes. And this is what it is. What does that mean for the farmers, for the coffee growers, for the coffee farmers, and for Ugandans who love taking coffee? If we say we are not extending our stay at ICO or ICA, what does that mean to the coffee farmers and to the wananchi of Uganda?
Yeah, Mr. Jagana, thank you very much, I think, for that question. I think I'll begin with giving, I think, the history.
Exactly.
That the International Coffee Agreement, I think, kind of started. It's a kind of, I think, a kind of, I would call it an arrangement where producer countries and consuming countries, I think, come and discuss issues related to the sustainability of the coffee Mr. Nkand was talking about. Okay. And as such,
for the growing countries, the producing countries,
yes,
and the consuming countries.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and as such, in order for us, I think, to move well, there had to be a kind of an agreement. And we have had about 6 agreements. The first one was in 1962. Then we had another one, I think, in 1983. Then another one in 1994. Another one in 2001. And then this one which we have, which is 2007. And when you read the International Coffee Agreement, which I have here in front of me, 2007, and you look at the objectives which the International Coffee Organization which handles, because now if you have an agreement, there must be, I think, an organization yes, which kind of handles. Just like in Uganda, if it is coffee, we have a National Coffee Act, and in there we have Uganda Coffee Development Authority, which ensures that that act is kind of put in place. But for this particular one, it's more of an agreement. It's not a law, but an agreement between producers and consumers. As yes, and of course we also know that there are articles in there. One of which is what he talked about, a fair price, that you have a forum that now, in that particular forum, was supposed to ensure that there is a fair price which is given not only to producers but consumers as well. Something, I think, which we see is not coming out. But the other aspect, I think, so I don't know whether I would go, but possibly Mr. Nkand can also come in here.
It's okay. Give us that history, because
let me add on to that history.
Okay.
We need to trace back and see what was the reasons, the intentions why International Coffee Agreement in the first place was put in place, and then later on the International Coffee Organization to implement the agreement.
So it's the ICA that gives birth to the organization.
It gave birth
to the organization.
To the organization.
Very good.
Actually, the ICA is as old as since our independence. You know, as a country, Uganda.
1962, as I say.
1962. So, what happened if we trace way back in 1954? At that time, Americans were up seriously in arms with their government, the citizens of America, about the high prices of coffee. But at the same time, the producer countries, you know, were also at some point faced with oversupply and sometimes with less supply, you know, on the market. So the American citizens started demanding for the prices to go down. And therefore, coupled with, you know, the producer countries, that also prices would go down at some point, they thought it important that an organization with an agreement would be, enacted, would be formulated to ensure that discussions around, the global coffee value chain, would be, negotiated, and later on an amicable position would be reached between the importing or consuming countries that time and the producing countries. Now, since that time, we have seen, an evolution in terms of the role of the International Coffee Organization.
Yes.
At the time, it was responsible for setting quotas.
Yes.
So there was a quota system for what these producer countries would sell to the market. And if there was an oversupply, Uganda would be asked to sell so much, Ethiopia same, and
Yes.
other coffee producing countries.
Yes.
Now, time came that, the world was changing, and especially spearheaded by the US, to ensure that market forces, take charge.
Yes.
Okay? That's what they assumed, that there was no need for intervention, in the market. And remembering very well that at that time it was mainly the state-owned coffee marketing boards that used to export coffee. And therefore, US's approach to this was basically market forces, and then later on, the real structural adjustment programs, took place. And then all this led to the breakdown of the coffee marketing boards. And therefore, there was no hand anymore as far as governments, were concerned. And that was the real beginning of
Problems that we see today.
Exactly, that we see today.
So the problems are as old as this country.
Exactly.
As old as independent
exactly. We have to know about the history of this.
Yes.
And where we are today, how we've come to be here. And therefore, as the role of the International Coffee Organization kept on evolving, now it ceased to regulate, coffee,
Yeah.
In
market really.
market.
Yes.
And therefore, the quota system was abandoned.
Yeah, that was 1989.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then it was all about market forces. But remembering very well that, producer countries or local exporting companies did not have, that financial muscle to ensure that really they would deal with the product. And now these international organizations, companies, multinationals came in, and therefore they took over. Now when you take over from a place where there is no capital for the locals to participate effectively, you just know that, as producer countries, you cease to be really in charge,
Yes.
because you don't own capital. And increasingly, I must tell you that now over a period of 2 decades, over 75% and sometimes 80% and even 90% of our coffee exports are, dominated by the big companies. Same thing at the international level. The big manufacturing, companies, talk about Nestle, talk about Salary, talk about, all these, they dominate, at that level. So this was a real structured, kind of move to ensure that there is grip, on the coffee value chain by the big corporations from the consuming countries. But we also remember that in some of the producer countries, we used to have, and we continue also to have, some kind of insurgencies, some wars. So the issue of this geopolitical factor has also been very, very important, you know, affecting the ICA, such that over a period of time, it has lost, you know, its fundamental original role.
The core.
Yeah, that it is not involved in regulating trade.
Yes.
Not at all.
Yeah.
The key role that it is involved in is collecting statistics. Okay? And therefore, for some of us who are involved in the trade, we could simply use their certificate to collect statistics, you know, to give to them. Actually, it is to the benefit of ICO. Okay? Not necessarily to our own, not to our own benefit, but to the benefit of ICO. So this is how ICO has been evolving with the agreement, losing its grip on trade.
Very important now. One nationalist said, a country without a history is like a face without a nose. Now, it's prudent that you've actually shared this history with us to actually know how ICA and the ICO come into play, etc. And of course, Uganda being a participant or a party to that, because when you look at the numbers that you talk about, I think they comprise of 90% of all the producing countries and about 87% of all the consuming countries also, whatever that is. So, meaning they are the body in charge of anything called coffee. Now, is it only we Ugandans that are seeing bad clauses in these agreements and the operations, the modus operandi of, or even others also have the similar problems? If yes, what are we seeing that the rest of the world does not see, that we feel this is actually not in the best interest of we Ugandans?
No, let me say this, that it is not only Uganda. The only challenge you have had is that this has only just happened in Uganda. But these kind of discussions and conversations have been on, you know, ever since the ICA was put in place. Countries have been joining and withdrawing.
Yes.
They have been joining and
going out.
Yes, including the United States of America.
They've also had problems with the same organization.
Including Vietnam that entered the coffee market as early as 1980s. Talk about Guatemala. Talk about Paraguay. And there are those countries also that have been producing coffee, and they are not.
So in other words, there is a problem with the so-called regulator.
Yes,
the organization.
Yes.
There is a problem.
There is a problem.
Yes, there is a fundamental problem. I think which now, but there is someone now. There needed to be someone who would, I think, build the cut. And for me, I believe that we have taken, I think, the right step to address the issues now, which really affect us as coffee producers. And I think one of them, which I wanted to bring out, I think is, okay, the coffees are normally differentiated. We have what we call the Colombian milds, and when they say milds, those are Arabicas. You know Colombia now, it means that Colombia is kind of an origin. And then there are also, another classification is the other milds. These are now coffees from the Honduras, from Peru, and from those Latin American countries. Then we have the other one now, which is the Brazilian nachos. Of course, now when they say Brazilian nacho, you know where it comes from. And then it comes out, when it comes to Robusta, although we are the birthplace of Robusta, we are not even mentioned.
Where is Ethiopia? Because Ethiopia should be one of...
Exactly, even Ethiopia is even not also mentioned.
Yeah, Ethiopia
and
should be
yet
one of
we
those.
thought that, yes, since Arabica is, Ethiopia is the birthplace of Arabica, I think there would have been a classification based on the Ethiopian, and then also for us, Robusta, it would have been, yes. And when you do that, when you get that, you tend to get a higher premium. And in order to, I think, to kind of operationalize that, we had come up with protocols, Robusta protocols, I think, which take our fine Robustas at the global level. And okay, we are not yet done with them, but of course now, if we had done that, then now our Robustas now would be differentiated, and farmers who are said Robusta farmers now would get even more money than they are getting. Yes.
Okay. So
but that one now is not being addressed. So they only have four classifications, and yet would have loved now Robustas also to be differentiated, like the Arabicas are differentiated.
Okay. You see, I'm still not understanding something, and I will understand it, because when I understand that thing, I'm a slow learner.
No, it's okay.
I take time
it's okay.
to grasp many of these things. But what I'm trying to see is well, we now need to look at the implications of our, you call it temporary something?
Yes.
Loosely, we call it withdrawal.
Yes.
Technically, you're calling it something temporarily. There's a way you call it. I think
kind of suspension. Yes, what we possibly didn't say is that the ICA 2007 was extended for another 2 years, from February 2022 to 2024, in order for ICO now to get, I think, to get contributions from all the developing countries. But for me, our concern was that even now the new draft doesn't address these issues we are raising. So indicating that even the new, when it comes, still it will almost be the same as
who
the old
owns
one.
these organizations? Who owns ICO? And who owns the agreement that we're talking about? Because we are contributors to it, we are partners, we are a party to that.
No, I think if you say who owns, I think we own, because we are now producing countries. So both countries producing and consuming countries own ICO.
With the countries that produce, Uganda,
yes,
etc.
yes, Uganda,
and
yes.
those that export from us,
yes.
Those that the importing countries are the owners of these agreements.
Yes.
And now, that's why I'm actually asking, why do we have to have these agreements with us, and we are in today, we are out the other day, America has done that, Honduras has done that, Venezuela has done that, Brazil has done that, citing quite a number of reasons. What is this thing that we don't harmonize, and what is the implication? What is the implication of our not joining the extension? What does that mean to us?
Okay, I think like the private sector now, I kind of address that, because now if I did, I would be kind of bad. They would say, for you because you are in government.
Because you're government,
yes.
you're
so
biased.
the private sector now kindly address that.
Now,
Mr. Ngadu,
now when you join any club where you become a member, you have interests. There is something you are looking for. Now, the various countries, member countries, both importing and exporting, they have interests for their own countries.
Yes.
Okay? And therefore, these interests, keep on evolving as factors dictate. And let me be now more futuristic, current and future. Where we are now and where we are going, coffee is going to become like an expression of, a hot cake, okay? Countries that were never coffee consuming have started consuming coffee, okay? Climate change is with us, and it is affecting us, and therefore productivity and production are likely to reduce. Urbanization and population explosion are taking place.
Yes.
And therefore, areas for coffee production are going to reduce. And when they do, this has serious implication in terms of the volume of coffee that will be produced for the growing population, but also for the increasing demand. And therefore, the major coffee consuming countries and the emerging ones, have to prepare themselves much better, even more than us, the producers, to ensure that still what they have done for the last 60 years to manage prices not to escalate is also maintained. This one, every Ugandan must understand it. Because even where we are today, coffee prices are supposed to be in the roof. But these prices are well artificially managed to ensure that the citizen of the traditional coffee consuming countries and then the emerging ones, of course, for those ones, they have not yet, taken up this battle seriously. But what they want is to manage this, the prices, and through governance of the value chain. How do you dominate, this value chain? And therefore, you manage better through large corporations, you see. And of course this would mean this is our time for industrialization. And therefore, if you are not making that much, you are not likely to industrialize. So I wanted to shed light why what is happening today, and that they had to call for an extension to buy more time to think through how the yet another ICA to come still will not give the real opportunities to producer countries to be able to profitably, produce this coffee. So it is all about the interests of the importing and exporting countries.
Okay.
Now Uganda is foresighted, I must say, and that other producer countries must take a leaf very fast to get galvanized, all of us, and starting with the African continent, to ensure that we put our case very, very clear.
Okay, yeah, and I think also on top of what Mr. Nkando has said, ICO, or ICA, in one of the clauses, I think they were supposed, to look for projects which would kind of support the producing countries. Now, like he mentioned the climatic change, which is real in the hearts. So originally we used to get projects from ICO, but I think 20 years ago, ICO is no longer doing that. And yet, I thought that now that would be an issue or something now which ICO would have handled. Yes, and I think we lost on that. So now in the new agreement, we would have loved ICO to play the role it used to play, because it used to go
bring back what they used to do.
Yes, because they would go to commodity fund for commodities, and then they would access funding which we would utilize. Yes, I would give an example, I think, of the mold. We had the mold prevention project here, and they came in here, and then they assisted us. But ever since now, that is something which they are no longer doing, and that is also our concern.
Okay, implications for our decisions. I need to hear from you about that, and also for some stakeholders who say they will not be able to export coffee. Maybe because of Uganda's decision of not joining the extension. Like I'm telling you, you at your level, Mr. Idi here looks at these things from a different angle. You from the government look at it from a very different angle. But you also need to consider this farmer, coffee farmer in Kasese somewhere. They have 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 30 acres of coffee. And when they hear the conversations like we are in here, then they say, well, now that means I'll not be able to export my coffee. The implications, we need to know. How does that impact on the farmers?
Okay, I'll possibly start, and then the exporter, who is the farmer exporter, because this one is a farmer, but also an exporter. So
you are a regulator.
Yes, for us we are regulators. Now for the regulators, I think, sincerely speaking, we are not going to have an impact on the if we withdraw from the ICO. Why? The reason is that now, like on pricing, which you talked about, the pricing, I think we get information from the global markets which I talked about. One
it's like dealing in stocks.
Yes, and and also in New York. So in that, and then it's now the forces of demand and supply which you talked about, and of course also
the of forces.
Yes, forces, yes, which kind of determine, I think, the markets, and then for us, ours really to disseminate information down there. So, but now I would also have asked, I will also ask him whether he has received any problem, because at least for me, who handles also the statistics in the February exports, they kind of decreased a bit. Why? Because the harvest was also decreased. It had also come to a tail end, and we didn't have the procurement from the harvest. But otherwise, for the destination markets, the exporters continued exporting even after we had left the ICO. So indicating that yes, we even have other certificates of origin, because that was, I think, the most concerning, that if now we always have ICO certificate of origin, if we don't attach it, what is going to happen? We have other certificates of origin, and which they have been using in Feb, and I think they didn't even have any problem in handling the exports. Okay. Yes.
Okay, Mr. Farmer Exporter, and from the private sector.
Now, as far as for us in trade are concerned, we do not see how our withdrawal from ICO is going to affect us. Why? Because for the certificate that they are talking about, as I have stated, its role is basically to capture statistics.
Yes, for ICO statistics.
So when you are a member of that entity, you are obliged to collect statistics regarding coffee in that country. And therefore it is to the advantage of ICO. Okay? So when we are dealing with coffee trade, it is buyer and seller. We don't have ICO coming in between
your business.
Yes.
To represent us or to represent the buyer. I think what is important really is information dissemination and communication to stakeholders.
Yes.
Because in the first place, they had never known about the International Coffee Organization. Many of them, they had never known about it. In fact, many would say, why aren't we consulted? But again, if you trace back who was consulted at the time of entry, okay, so
when we chose to enter,
when we chose to enter,
who did you consult?
Yes,
who did you
and even when we've been represented by our colleagues from UCDA, have we always labored to find out what do you represent us, tell us what are the issues, you see? I think for me this time around it is important to appreciate, the foresightedness, that generations after generations of these countries have been losing out, on this important commodity. And therefore, withdrawing is also a negotiation tool. I want to assure you that ICO will have to fly in here, to discuss with the, our leadership within the sector, and because they need Uganda. Uganda is an important player, but Uganda should not simply participate when it is only spending, because it involves spending. Your participation involves spending.
Okay. And
really, I appreciate that somebody did not only appreciate the allowance, the allowance given, but say, no, how about my country? How about my country? The way we would see other countries, doing it. In fact, this act is an act that I see America took for its own citizens to ensure that they penetrate, the entire world in coffee-producing countries, to get grip onto the coffee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Time is running out, and we just have about 6 minutes to be out of studios. And I think I want to appreciate you, gentlemen, for the discussion here. But finally, way forward with our coffee potential, because I think we have the potential, and from what is happening, way forward to all of us as a regulator, UCDA, and of course to the farmers, the exporters, and the small holders, whatever they are. What is this thing for them in the next 3 minutes, and we'll be out of here for both of us.
Yes, thank you very much. I think the way forward is, I think, what he talked about, that yes, information dissemination, that we are going to make sure that all stakeholders are on board. And I think what we are doing now on EBC, I think what I know is that now so many people from Uganda now really know now why we kind of withdrew. Okay. And I think I know that they have appreciated. And so we need now, but how about the other farmer now down the road? So that's what we are going to do. We have field staff in the coffee growing regions, and we shall continue disseminating that information. And then the other one now, of course, would be the engagement which you talked about with the authorities, the other side, to also appreciate that yes, our concerns, I think, are valid, and that they should be looked into. And then lastly, I think it's about now the ensuring that there's no there is smooth running of the coffee trade, because what we do, especially apart from the dissemination which you talked about, but we also do quality assurance. None of the exports now goes outside unless it is thoroughly analyzed and then certified for export. So we shall continue, but on top of that also we shall continue also disseminating also the National Coffee Act, which addresses I think the actors within the coffee value chain.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you so much. Final from you, Mr. Nkandu.
Yeah, quickly, I would like to urge fellow Ugandans that let us, continue without losing energies, without losing hope in coffee production, because this is our time. This is our time, as a country. It is our time as Africa really to benefit out of coffee. Let these negotiations, go on. Moreover, Uganda has also embarked on domestic coffee consumption. Other coffee producing countries in Africa and non-producing countries in Africa are starting, to take coffee. Therefore, we are going to have a domestic and a continental coffee market. But these revisions, if ICO is to exist, definitely they have to address some of these issues, because some producing countries are no longer entirely producing countries. They are also consuming countries. Brazil is number 2, and therefore why you classify it as only an exporting country? No, it's Ethiopia, same, and many others are coming. So these are real issues, for us to take forward.
Okay.
So thank you very much for hosting us.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Mr. Joseph Nkandu, the Executive Director of the National Union of Coffee, Agribusiness and Farm Enterprises, NUCAFE. Thank you so much for having allowed and joined us here on Good Morning Uganda Extra today. And thank you so much, Mr. Chizito Mayanja, the Market Intelligence and Information Manager at Uganda Coffee Development Authority. I also want to thank you so much.
Thank you.
And of course, to all the viewers out there who've been part of the conversation, we just want to wish you a very blessed morning. My name is Jagana Semakola Ziksoka. Shalom.
Thank you.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.